To start with, I am honestly grateful that my daughter Tara has a great relationship with her stepmother Danny. To give some context, my husband, Mark, and I did not have a good relationship. We fell in love quite young and got married because we thought that was the right thing to do. I got pregnant with Tara, and although Mark tried to be a good father, he was also extremely lazy. He never helped me with Tara in any way. I was the one who fed her, changed her diapers, stayed awake the whole night until she could sleep, bathed her, and took her for walks. Mark was the fun parent who would just come back home and spend an hour with the baby. Within that 1 hour, I would be cooking his meals or cleaning up the kitchen. Mark would then have his dinner and go into his den to play video games. If I ever asked him to help me around the house or with Tara, he would tell me how this was a woman's job and that is how God intended. This would lead to us having disagreements where I would plead with him to help me out because I was too exhausted, but he would refuse point blank. One time I was too sick to even move around, so I asked him to please look after Tara so I could take some rest and recover. He started an argument with me, calling me lazy and saying how his mother never asked his father for help. It really angered me because he was as much Tara's parent as I was, yet he never lifted a finger. I yelled at him that if he didn't help out, I would pack my bags and leave him. This rattled him a bit, so he grumbled, but at the end, he took a leave of absence to take care of Tara so I could sleep for a few hours. As my maternity leave was coming to an end, I asked my mother if she could babysit Tara during my working hours, and she graciously accepted. Mark's mother never even offered to help, but I was fine with it. Mark didn't like that I was going back to work since he had been trying to get me to be a stay-at-home wife for a long time, but I would always refuse. Now looking back, I am thankful that I never left my job since Mark lost his job when his company downsized. This was a shock to him as well as other employees who were let go. When he told me, I wanted to panic also because we needed the money for household expenses and taking care of Tara. However, I knew if I panicked, he would get even more anxious, so I assured him that I would bear all the expenses around the house until he could get back on his feet. Since he did not have a job, I asked him to look after Tara so my mother could get a break from the babysitting duties. At first, Mark didn't want to, but eventually, he agreed. Every day I would come back home to Mark sitting in the same spot on the sofa playing video games with Tara playing on the floor nearby. Basic needs like meals and baths were neglected, and I often returned home to find Tara hungry and unkempt. This would obviously make me pissed because on one hand I had no choice but to work hard to single-handedly support my family, and on the other hand I felt guilty that my daughter was being neglected. I remember that during this time we would fight a lot more, with Mark saying how he was trying to find a job yet he never went for any interviews. 6 months after spending his days at home, Mark told me how he wanted to take up a business course. He had always wanted to start a business, but I just didn't think it was the right time since I wanted him to find a stable job for the time being. However, he apparently had discussed with his parents already, who were ready to pay him for the college fees. I was the last one he informed, as if I meant nothing to him as a partner. I think this should have been my time to leave, but like a fool who refuses to quit, I stayed. While I worked and looked after Tara, Mark went back to study. Eventually, he graduated and started his own business. It was doing well, so he started hiring people under him. This is how Danny came into his life. She was this young, perky girl straight out of college and was hired to be his personal assistant. Danny and Mark would spend hours together, but I never thought anything about it. The thought of him cheating never even crossed my mind. However, Mark started introducing Tara to Danny every time he took Tara to his office and insisted on Tara and Danny spending time together. This made me a bit suspicious. I asked Mark outright if there was something between him and her, but he denied vehemently, telling me that I was overthinking. I dropped it until one of my friends called me one day and told me that she saw Danny and Mark sitting in a cafe holding hands. She had no idea who Danny was, but from her description of that woman sitting with Mark, I knew it had to be Danny. I was not only embarrassed that my husband was cheating, but I knew that everyone would now find out about it. That evening, I insisted on Mark inviting Danny for dinner, telling him how I should know her also since she worked for him. He had no idea that I now had proof of his discretions. During dinner, I told them directly that I was done with them sneaking behind my back and that I knew everything. Mark froze as Danny went pale as a sheet. I told her that I didn't care if she was sleeping with my husband because, at this point, no one could save our marriage. Danny and Mark looked at each other and she finally confessed that she was in love with Mark. She went on to say that she didn't mean for this to happen and that she was sorry for everything. However, Mark asked me why I had invited Danny if I already knew everything, and started telling me how I had no right to embarrass them. He told me how he was not going to sit there and apologize since I was the one who had failed at our marriage first. I scoffed as he went on to blame me, saying how I should have tried to keep him satisfied, but I never did because I was always too busy trying to be independent. I shook my head and reminded him how my work put food on the table while he was jobless, and also when he was off going to study. Mark argued that I could have left my job after his business was doing well, but I told him that I couldn't take any chances and we both needed to have jobs so we could bring in the income necessary for our future. I was so pissed at this man for trying to weasel his way out of this fiasco that I went on to tell him how I had never neglected him or Tara and always did all the house chores regardless of my job, so he had no right to blame me. He kept trying to blame me, but I ignored him. I looked at Danny and mouthed her good luck before excusing myself from the table. I knew exactly what I had to do now. In some way, Mark was freed from the burden of finding an excuse to divorce him. Yes, I used to be in love with him at one point, but since Tara, we had just become roommates living in the same house. I was the one doing the bulk of the work around the house anyway, so I had nothing to lose now by leaving him. I packed my bags along with Tara's while Mark kept asking what I was doing. I informed him that I was leaving and would be sending him divorce papers soon. He tried to argue, saying that I was being too cold and that we should take a beat to think about it, but I didn't think there was anything left to think about anymore. I simply had enough and went to stay with my parents for the time being. If you are wondering if his parents ever reached out to me and comforted me, then you are wrong. They never said anything to my ex for breaking up the family. It was only later that I found out the reason why. You see, Danny was not just young, she also came from a wealthy family as well, and by marrying her, Mark would be securing his money bag. Honestly, I did not care about all that, and my goal was simply to ensure that Mark and I could be good co-parents for the sake of Tara. From my first impression, Danny didn't seem like a bad person, so I hoped that she could be a good step-parent for my daughter as well. During the divorce, I took half of my husband's assets, which was a lot since his business was making six figures. I bought a place for myself and Tara to live in. Mark and I had shared custody, so while I got Tara from Monday to Friday, he got Tara from Friday evening until Monday morning when he would be dropping her at school. After our divorce, he immediately let Danny move in with him. Tara would come back home and tell me how Danny and Mark would take her to expensive restaurants for dinner or to amusement parks. She would always be really excited to meet them during the weekend. In the beginning, I didn't notice anything. However, my daughter started detaching herself from me more and more. I was the parent who would make her finish her homework or teach her to do chores around the house, just back things like washing her own dishes or folding her laundry, and she didn't like that. I was the one who would make her eat healthy food and would refuse to order from MCD every day. She would always insist on me buying her expensive gifts, which I didn't think were appropriate for a kid. Mark and Danny, on the other hand, were the fun parents who took her everywhere, and she would spend her weekends doing absolutely nothing except watching TV or eating good food. She would often tell me how chill they were, and if I didn't listen to her, she would say hurtful things like she wished she lived with them only. This would break my heart, but she was a kid, so I would let it slide. When Tara was 12, Danny got pregnant with twins. Tara was really anxious during time and would constantly keep on asking me if Mark would still love her, and I would have to reassure her that her father would love her no matter what. Her anxiety got so bad that I had to talk to Mark about it. In the end, he did talk to Tara and reassured her that nothing would change between them. However, Tara informed him that she wanted to spend more time with him, and he agreed. Hence, she started going to his place on Wednesday evenings instead of Fridays. Tara had her own room in the house until then, but since the twins were coming, Mark told her that they would renovate the basement for her while her bedroom would turn into a. Tara agreed. This all happened without my knowledge because, at this point, my daughter was hardly communicating with me. She was so focused on being a part of Mark's family that she would hardly tell me anything going on in her life. After the twins were born, Mark informed me that for the next 2 months, Danny didn't want Tara to come over since she wanted to take care of the babies and give her 100% attention to them. I yelled at him that this would seriously hurt his daughter and make her question if he even loved her, but he argued back that he needed to be there for Danny and the twins, and they were his first priority. When I broke the news to Tara, she started to cry and kept asking why Danny didn't want her anymore. I did my best to reassure her as much as I could. After a month, when Mark came to pick her up, Tara was beside herself with joy. She later told me how adorable the twins were and how beautiful her room was in the basement. After seeing the pictures of her new room, I did agree that it was pretty, even though it irked me a bit that she had agreed to give up her bedroom for the twins. However, if my daughter was happy, then I was happy also. As days went on, Tara would find excuses to spend more and more days with her father. She would tell me how she loved babysitting the twins since Danny sometimes needed a break. This really pissed me off, so I forbade Mark from using his daughter as a stand-in babysitter, but he argued that this is how children bond. I told him that his children could bond without Tara changing their diapers and feeding them with a bottle, which was not a job for a teenager. After some back and forth, he agreed. However, Tara yelled at me when she found out. She told me that Danny had informed her that I had complained to Mark about it. Tara told me how she wanted to do this for the twins, but I knew my daughter was desperately trying to somehow fit in or be loved by Mark and Danny by doing whatever it was that they wanted. I assured her that I had no ill intentions. I wanted her to enjoy her years as a teenager, and that what Mark and Danny were doing was basically parentifying her, but she didn't care. This was the start of Tara always choosing Danny over me. I never disliked Danny, but it would hurt me every time my own daughter compared me to her stepmother in every way. Teenagers can be harsh, and Tara was no different. She also started to get meaner and nastier towards me. For example, I remember that once after work, I came back home and was sitting watching TV while eating ice cream. When she came out of her room, she commented how I'm becoming a fat cow these days. It really took me by surprise since I wasn't even fat to begin with. When I asked her about why she even said such a thing, Tara told me that Danny had taught her gluten makes people fat and she wasn't allowed to eat any gluten at Mark and Danny's place. I informed her that while that may be true, gluten is not inherently bad and that she had no right to body shame someone just because she didn't prefer eating that. As more and more days passed, Tara just became an entirely different person. In every other conversation, she would bring up how Danny did this or that, and it essentially felt like she was turning into a mini Danny herself. She would refuse to go anywhere with me when the sun was out, telling me how she didn't want to become tan or insist on skipping breakfast so she could lose a few extra pounds to fit into her bikini, which Danny had bought one size smaller. She would weigh herself every day and would note down her weight in a diary. She would tell me how Danny had told her that she had the potential to take part in beauty pageants if she stuck to this routine. I was so pissed when I found out about this. Up until that point, I never had a conversation with Danny, but I decided enough was enough and I finally reached out to her. However, Danny didn't see any issues with my daughter's behavior and told me how she had simply suggested Tara take part in a beauty pageant and that it wasn't her fault if Tara had actually taken it to heart. I pointed out to her how Tara clearly saw her as a second parent, so she should be more careful with her words, but Danny told me how I should push my daughter to be the best version of herself instead of trying to bring her down. I was really taken aback by her words and asked her to keep her weird ideologies to herself. Later, Mark called me to yell at me about how I should not talk to his wife this way. When I informed him about everything, he told me that he agreed with Danny and that Tara should not take Danny's advice or suggestions to such extreme. I yelled back at him to open his eyes because clearly Tara was being influenced, but my ex-husband clearly didn't care enough. I did try to talk with Tara and tell her how she should enjoy her teenage years as much as she could without worrying about all these trivial things like weight and getting tanned. But Tara remained steadfast in her resolve, closing herself off from me and shutting down any attempts at open communication. It was a heartbreaking realization, watching my daughter slip further away with each passing day. She would also not come to me for any decision or general life situation. For example, if her school was taking her on a trip, she would wait to visit her father so he could sign the form for her, even though I never had any problem with her going also. It was like she didn't see any real importance of me in her life at all. I found myself relegated to the sidelines, a mere spectator in her life. As a result, I was quite depressed, but during this time, I met a man who changed everything in my life. Henry and I met when I was at the lowest point of my life. When he and I started dating, he would see how much Tara's behavior was affecting me and would reassure me that every teenager goes through a rebellious phase. However, things just got worse and worse. Tara and I would get into constant fights either about her falling grades or her not submitting her assignments on time, and this is when Tara would start to blame me for everything. She would also constantly comment on how she understood why Mark left me for Danny. This was a sore topic for me and it would break my heart every time she would say this angrily. I hate to write this, but I started to pull away from my daughter bit by bit. When Tara turned 18 and it was time for her to go to college, she and Mark came to me to discuss something important. I thought it was about the college fees and I was ready to tell Mark that I was ready to pay half of her college tuition, but Mark instead informed me that Tara wanted me to give up my right to be her parent. I sat there shocked as Tara told me that she had been thinking about this for a long time and that she wanted Danny to officially adopt her. I was so taken aback that at first I thought this was all just a bad dream, but Tara pleaded with me that she loved Danny more than me and she wanted her to be her real mommy. I asked her to explain her reasons, hoping to dissuade her from pursuing this. Tara spoke earnestly, explaining how she felt a stronger bond with Danny and how she admired her stepmother's qualities and accomplishments. She expressed that if she became a legal child of Danny, she would also become a part of her inheritance, since that is what Danny's parents had expressed to her. As Tara poured her heart out, I struggled to contain my emotions. It felt as though my world was crumbling around me, as if everything I had worked so hard for was slipping through my fingers. The realization that my daughter no longer saw me as her mother was a devastating blow, one that left me reeling with a sense of profound loss. Tara continued to plead with me that she had always seen Danny as her real mother, so I should not fight this. Mark chimed in, agreeing with Tara and telling me that I should not take this personally and that I should respect Tara's wishes. For the next few weeks, I had a tough decision to make. Despite the pain coursing through my veins, I knew that I had to consider Tara's wishes. I couldn't force her to maintain a relationship that she no longer desired, nor could I deny her the opportunity to seek happiness on her own terms. My parents tried to talk to Tara, but she refused to entertain their calls. In the days that followed, I grappled with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I mourned the loss of the bond I had shared with Tara, grieving for the daughter I had once known. But amidst the sorrow, I also felt a sense of resignation, a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. I would constantly cry in front of Henry, who was the only one who stayed by my side. Even he felt what Tara was doing to me was unbelievably cruel. With a heavy heart, I reluctantly agreed to Tara's request, knowing that it would mark the end of a chapter in both our lives. I won't get into the legal details, but it did take a couple of weeks in the end. Tara and I were legally separated, and Danny proceeded with the adoption process. After this, Tara basically stopped talking to me. I can't even write how painful those days were for me. I had lived up until then just for my daughter, but watching her drift away from my life was extremely painful. I have to admit that Henry did keep me alive and never left my side. He encouraged me to go to therapy and moved in with me so he could take care of me. I even left my job at that time and he looked after me completely. I was diagnosed with depression and started taking medications. Watching Henry rallying behind me, I found a new reason to keep myself alive. Slowly but surely, I started to heal and stopped blaming myself for everything. He encouraged me to join his business just to keep myself busy and I agreed. Henry was the partner I never had but I did deserve. I poured myself into my work and my relationship with Henry, finding joy in the simple pleasures that life had to offer. For the last 6 years, I have worked with Henry to build his business and he has made me an equal partner and given me a seat at the table. We respect each other professionally as well as personally. We got married and have built a good life for us. Never in my wildest dreams, I thought Tara, who had not even given me a call once over the last few years, would call me out of the blue yesterday. Her unexpected call caught me off guard, stirring up a whirlwind of emotions I thought I had buried deep within. She asked me about my life and informed me about hers. I didn't know why she was calling but I was glad that she remembered me after all this time. At the end of the day, regardless of what a legal paper says, she was my daughter and I will always continue to love her no matter how much she hurt me. I thought she had matured and wanted to have a relationship with me. However, this is when our conversation shifted to her approaching wedding. I was surprised that my baby girl was now getting married and I could not contain my emotions. Tara then informed me that the reason she had called me was because she wanted me to pitch in for the wedding expenses. I was taken aback as she went on to tell me how Mark didn't have much money to offer since his business had been affected during COVID and never really recovered, while Danny had refused to help her out much for the wedding since she wanted to save money for her twins. Tara went on to tell me how she knew I was doing well now that I was married to Henry, as she would occasionally stalk me on social media, so she wanted me to pay for her wedding since I basically owed her. All my emotions of joy and excitement quickly turned to shock and disbelief as I could not believe what Tara was saying. She was acting extremely entitled when she had been the one who had left me behind. I politely told her that although I was happy that she wanted to have a relationship with me, I was not going to just forgive and forget whatever had happened in the past. I reminded her how she basically wanted me to give up my parental rights so Danny could adopt her and how she considered her to be her real mother, so I didn't see why she needed me to help her out in any way. Tara argued that I was still her biological mother and it wasn't fair that I had so much money now. She told me that giving her a few $1,000s for the wedding wouldn't even be a big deal. I made it very clear to her that while I wished her all the happiness in the world, I couldn't simply write a blank check to cover the costs of her wedding. She got pissed and called me a few bad words, basically blaming me for abandoning her and telling me how I didn't fight for her enough all those years ago. It was like she was trying to grasp at straws just to justify her actions, and our conversation wasn't really going anywhere. She angrily disconnected the call and now I'm left wondering if I should have just helped my daughter out for her wedding, which I can very much afford to do so. Ida for not helping my daughter? Update 1. I never expected this post would blow up in a matter of days. I have had hundreds of complete strangers reaching out to me on Reddit telling me that I should under any circumstances concede to my daughter's demands. When I posted this, I was feeling so guilty because she is after all my daughter, but seeing all your comments about how she is basically using me has me questioning my own judgments. It's very difficult as a parent to stop loving your child even if they don't want you anymore. Tara will always be my baby, but I have to accept that she is no longer a child and has turned out to be an entitled adult. Mark and Danny haven't reached out to me, so I guess they have no idea that Tara is requesting me for financial assistance. I will not be helping her out in any way and will also have a talk with Henry regarding the same. Update 2. I sent a message to Tara just like some of you wanted me to do so. Dear Tara, I want to express how much I appreciate you reaching out to me and sharing updates about your life. It meant a lot to me to hear from you, and I'm glad to know that you're doing well. Regarding your request for financial assistance with your wedding, I want to be transparent with you about where I stand. While I understand your desire for support during this important time in your life, I must respectfully decline your request. Since you never wanted me to be a part of your life, I believe it's best for us to maintain the current distance between us, as it's important for me to prioritize my own well-being and boundaries. I want nothing but the best for you as you embark on this new chapter, and I hope that you can understand and respect my perspective. I sent this message to her this morning and will update here if she replies back to my message. Update 3. So it turns out that she did see my message but has left me on read. I guess the majority of you are right. She never really cared and just wanted me to pay her money without any questions. Henry is not happy with how Tara has behaved with me and has asked me to block her so she cannot contact me further with any unwarranted requests. Up until this moment, I was a bit conflicted, but now I will do so. As for those of you who are worried about my will, don't worry. Even though Henry and I don't have children, he does have nephews and nieces, so we will mostly be leaving them everything. I appreciate all the support and advice I have received from the Reddit community. Moving forward, I will focus on my own well-being and continue to cherish the loving relationship I have with my husband.